Chair recognizes Senator the Honourable Fred Mitchell.
Thank you. No, it's not necessary. Thank you very much, Madam President. First thing I'd like to do is to thank my colleagues who spoke before me for the ample presentations which they made on behalf of the opposition in elucidating what our positions are with regard to this budget communication and the bills which have followed to effect the budget. I think they've amply explained it all, and numbers are not really my strong suit, so I don't really intend to go any much farther with that, except to also give an explanation and vote. We've been loosely saying, or colloquially saying, that we will vote against the budget, but I think I need to be more particular with this and say that the specific opposition is to the bill on VAT, and that's the one we will be calling for a division on. But our view is that the government must have the authority, the spending authority, which will come into force on the 1st of July. The only question is what underlies, what are you going to depend on for that spending? And we think the tax revenue which is currently available to the government is adequate for the expenses of the country. And so there's no need to increase the value-added tax. It is adequate in our view. I found it somewhat ironic that one of the senators who spoke before me from the side opposite quoted Herbert Hoover in support of his case for raising this tax and doing the difficult things. I said across the floor, because my friend opposite is an historian himself, that could have been the worst example of someone to choose to support a case, because Herbert Hoover lost the election because he was totally and absolutely tone deaf to public opinion. The fact is, there was a crash of the stock market. People were telling him the government needs to intervene to help, and he, ideologically fixed as he was, just ignored it. And so election comes along, I think in '32, and Roosevelt wipes him out. So I certainly didn't think you wanted to hitch yourself to that star, because the fact is, one of the arguments that's being advanced from our side and from the community at large is that the F&M, having one office on the promise that it would listen to the people, are tone deaf to the cries on this tax issue. And so I suppose from our point of view, we fit in quite neatly with Hoover. Glad you mentioned him. Glad you mentioned him. But the fact is, 1 year out from opposition, when you said you would listen to the people, and then there's a video which is going around where where the minister, the finance minister, was speaking at a graduation, and he tried to make the case for VAT, and boy, did they tell him, we ain't come here to listen to no VAT. We want our children to graduate. This is not the occasion for that. But God bless him, he kept going. You know, as people would say, irregardless. Kept pressing forward. Irregardless. Yeah. No. I mean, the word is regardless, but you know, in the vernacular, it's irregardless. Irregardless. He kept pressing forward.
I think we understand.
Yeah. So that is a starting point. I also wanted to remind my other friend opposite. I said to his leader that that's a convincing spokesman. I mean, he almost had me convinced. He had me going there, right? And then I remembered the last time. Yeah, I was saying amen. I know how to say it. The last time I'd spoken in this place, and we were bantering across the floor, I said to him, when I started out, he had quoted some statistics before, and this time he came with wonderful statistics about, you know, this percentage growth and that percentage growth. And I reminded him of this expression: there's lies damn lies and statistics. Because the problem I was saying to Senator Dovell is when you walk, my point, you walk around Port Lucaya, you walk around Freeport, and what happens is these statistics don't match up with what you see and feel on the ground. You know, Port Lucaya is a graveyard. The other day I went up to Freeport and I was saying, now I've got 3 things to do. I've got to go to 3 shops in Grand Bahama. And normally you would take 2 hours to carry out such a task in New Providence. So I said, it's Grand Bahama, it'll take an hour. Madam President, in 20 minutes I was done. Each store I went into, people standing up, swinging their hands. Nothing to do. Just walk in, get served, and out you go. Pleasure for me, but symptomatic of what's happening. What's happening. And so I'm saying, again, be careful how you adopt statistics to buttress a case when there is enough anecdotal evidence to show that in Grand Bahama and throughout our country, people are suffering. And the question you ask yourself is, how, 1 year out from the experience of being in opposition, with the central bank within the last month saying that 50% of the people who make under $30,000 a year cannot make ends meet at the end of the month, you then go and impose a tax of 12.5% on their grocery bill. 12% on their grocery bill. How do you do that? It just seems counterintuitive and unconscionable. And then the leader for the government explained amply at the start of his presentation what the constitutional rule is as regards those who are supporting the case for the government. And he said that he'd held this seminar and he told the members of Parliament, look, when the whip is on, if you're part of the executive, you're supposed to vote with the government, and if you don't vote for the government, there's a consequence for it. That's the rule. I think he said this, but I'm going to repeat it, so I'm going to amplify it for my point, except that the Prime Minister can always dispense with the rule. Well, I'm saying it, because the manual says it. So let all who hear this, that if the Prime Minister wanted to help the fellas out, he could have helped them out. He could have said, so, well, no, that didn't imperil his majority. No, sir. Not those 4 votes. What did the member say? Philippians 3 and 13, man. Forgetting that which is past, man. What are you bringing up all the stories for? All the stories. You know, we talking about now. We talking about now. Yeah, forgetting. Yeah. And so the manual of procedure allows the Prime Minister to dispense with that, and it didn't imperil his majority. So, what we found curious is that, let's say, the parliamentary secretaries. I know, and I'm glad I saw Vaughn Miller today in the newspaper saying that he brought it up. He brought it up in the debate. So I'm just trying to help you out. So, Mr. Miller says, don't feel sorry for me. You know, I did what I had to do. And I believe that people knew what they were doing. And I said to colleagues, from a political point of view, it's better to be seen to be fired than to resign. Nobody understands resignation in the Bahamas. That's a wasted effort. You know, what you got to do is you have to be a hero, be fired, be dismissed. So they knew what they were doing. The one I can't understand, though, and I find curious, is the poster boy for F&M youth and participation in the country gets cut loose by the Prime Minister 1 year and a month after going through Bain Town. The poster boy for youth. So I thought to myself, what could have happened, Madam President, is, you know, the Prime Minister could have had a little word on the side and said, my boy, take a little trip to Miami, cut the ribbon for me over there as we open in the consulate. Others were away. One was in China, one was in London, others were in the Cayman Islands. Very exotic destinations. But poor Travis, found himself in Nassau and now finds himself jobless. Yeah, unemployed, then employed, and now unemployed again. Yes, that's true. That's true. What I think, though, is we have competing visions about how budgets operate and what they're supposed to do. There was a lot of narrative and talking around all of these debates, Madam President, about borrowing, as if the cardinal sin is to borrow. But I would go so far as to say that there can be no development of this country unless we borrow. There can be no development of this country without borrowing. So I would also say this. Running the government of the Bahamas is not like running Sky Bahamas. It's not like running Sky Bahamas.
So why would you choose Sky?
Why not?
It's not like running Sky Bahamas. Because government exists to protect, to manage, and to promote. And there are compelling reasons to borrow, even if it doesn't make economic sense on a quantitative basis. I remember P.J. Patterson's story in Jamaica. Jamaica had $2.4 billion in reserves, U.S. reserves. Yeah, U.S. Did very well. Right. No, under Patterson's government. $2.4 billion. And then there was a housing bubble. No. The mortgage companies in Jamaica engaged in too much speculation, and they all went bust. Suddenly, people were lining up at the equivalent of the housing companies or house savings and loans or the credit unions, whatever it is, and they couldn't get their money. Who was supposed to solve that problem? Only the government could. Now, there were plenty of people who said, leave it alone, let the market take care of it, but the end result would have been the collapse, in part, of the housing market and in part the financial system. So only the government could intervene. So they took their reserves, and he said that, he was preparing himself, going in one day to his party's convention, annual convention. And he walked up to this man who was a strong supporter of his, who lived in the country. And the man said to him, Prime, I don't want to hear any story. All I know is when I go to the bank, I want my money. When I go to the bank, I want my money. Government had to act. Reserves vanished. Jamaica's economy was set back, but there was only one body that could do it.
Right.
So I say this. 216, October the 6th. Hurricane comes. Country shut down for 4 days. $100 million of revenue uncollected over 4 days. Can't recover. Country has to go to the bank and raise $150 million to keep it going. That's $250 million. And when you look at what happened in that year, they'll keep talking about these deficits. First, we had to borrow. There's no other way to deal with it. Nobody's going to give you a grant. The Bahamas is not going to get a grant. Not at $23,000 per capita income. Not going to do it. So when you look at the math, well, that's the whole. That's the whole. And my point is, sometimes it's only the government that can act. So borrowing is not the issue, and neither is it a sin. Reading Gail Saunders' essay on the settlement of the Bahamas after emancipation, she tells a story of what our communities were like. None of the kids can remember that today. Bahamas was essentially a set of islands separated by large stretches of water, as it is now. Communities along the coastline, long stretches. You had to either go by horseback along very bad roads, or you had to go there by boat, even within islands. So, for example, if you wanted to go to West End, you probably had to take a boat to get to Smith's Point, because there's no road. That's what the PLP met in 1967. That's what the PLP meant. And so the contribution which borrowing made to this country is its development today. The roads, the bridges, everything, the water. And that generation put repaying the loans on us, and happy to do it because the country is developed. It's better off. It's better off. And the great thing that the money went to do is education. Hilary Beckles from the University of the West Indies points out people keep talking about Jamaica's economic problems today. 1962, he says something like 90% of the people in Jamaica couldn't read in 1962 when the country became independent. So the first thing the government had to do, the British give the impression, oh, we gave you independence, we left these countries in such wonderful shape. Bahamas, they left one public high school. One public high school. The government high was the single public high school left. No. You couldn't. That wasn't. Those were not considered. That wasn't. No. Not in the same league. No, sir. The single public high school. Until comprehensive education became a part of the official policy of the country. Cecil Wallace Whitfield, Arthur Hanna brought those into being. Had to borrow to build schools. Couldn't be done without it. Some of the schools today, like L.W. Young, need to be replaced. They've outlived their shelf life. Same thing with L.N. Coakley and Exuma.
Yep.
Yes, that's fine. Some have concrete block construction. Some parts of L.W. Young similarly. But these schools like S.E. McPherson, who all brought, because the kids needed to be educated, we needed to put them in something quickly, so we got these special loans to build these prefab structures. They need to be replaced, and the irony is you have a richer country today than you had then. You could do it then, and we're complaining about having to do it now. Hey, our bet is the future is going to be better than the past and the present. No question about it. No question. So borrowing is the issue. The issue is, what is the size of the economy? What's the size of the economy? The economy grows. You know, as my friend Sir Albert Miller used to say, one good deal wipes out all the debt. One good deal. Say? Yeah, right. You have no idea what happened, but you always have to bet that the future is going to be better than the past or the present. And we mustn't restrict ourselves philosophically by getting all this religious fervor about borrowing and deficits. You got to do what you have to do to develop the country. And I just attended the public scholarship presentation or awards on Thursday. My colleague Jerome Fitzgerald was the minister in 2015 when this program started. I was a little surprised his name wasn't mentioned once. You know, this country, once you're gone, you're gone. No, not this program. Not this program. He traveled across the U.S. and Canada spoke to colleges and universities and got them to agree to have these, and it's reserved only for people in the public schools. He did that. But that's immaterial to this point. The point I was making is, if you heard the stories of these young people, there's a young girl from Acklands. I mean, this was so emotionally taxing for me at the end of it, just to listen to these, because there's nothing in my life that can compare. Grew up, 2 parents, no problems, happy home, no issues, no nothing. Lived in the same place till I moved out as an adult, went to college. But the stories that these little children tell you about how they survived. The young lady from Ackland said that she moved 15 times in New Providence, 15 times. And each time she lost everything that she owned, didn't save anything. But she said, I'm going to make it. And she got one of the scholarships. Young boy. Fellow's name is Omar Davis. You should see the video, it's online. A compelling story. He says, you know, my father was a drug dealer. My father was a drug dealer. Says police used to kick the door down all the time and question me about what was going on. That's right, he lived in Camp Road. My father's my friend, and he always told me, call him short man, do not be like me. And then he finds his father killed in front of him. 8 shots. What do you say? 9 shots. 8 into his father, 1 into the house. And he watches his father die before him, but he says, I'm going to make something of myself. Just one of 3 stories told that day. And I'm saying, we're hoping that the program is going to have 200 students by the time next year comes around. I think it has allocated something like $2 million. My word, man. You know, this was what I'm saying. This country is wealthy enough, Madam President. I believe this in all my heart. This country is wealthy enough to put more than that behind this program. The only future we have is these kids. The only future we have. The budget itself. Is really already allocated when we get here. I think I said this last year. Let's see, 70% of it is all set for us in terms of emoluments and fixed charges. The rest of it, 30%, is little discretionary things, but that's really what we're arguing about. The rest of it is all set. And I'm concerned that people are boasting about how the public service, they say people were hired, we packed, in my words, we packed the public service with people who shouldn't be working because they weren't needed, they didn't have anything to do. That's not my recollection of what happened. Not my recollection at all. What I do know, though, is that, and I want to bring this to the attention of the Minister of Labor, who was saying when he spoke how all these things were done in conciliation and so on and so forth, that I know 2 workers from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs who filed for a conciliation hearing. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs agreed with the legal position that they should be brought back, and to this day have not complied with that. And I've seen, what I've seen is that, amongst others, that as small as these salaries are, the moment these people lose these salaries, Madam President, they are back into poverty in the worst way. Can't pay medical bills, can't get food, and the indignity of social services has been further undermined by this fact. Notwithstanding what the government says about the programs not being cut back, the story that goes around town is these programs no longer exist to assist people. And I say where there's smoke, there's fire. And so one of the things we'll be doing is to ask the government in the heads about the social services programs and the extent to which there is support for people who can't make it. The other point is the immigration fees. I see where the immigration fees have been increased, and $50 million or so is my recollection of what the revenue is from immigration annually. So any pretense that immigration, Madam President, is meant to foster the Bahamianization policy, we now know is safely out the window. Because really, immigration is now a revenue center for the government. I realized that under my predecessor. I came in when the figure was 45 million. It's now 50 million, more or less. No, as the American Constitution, the American Declaration says, we hold these truths to be self-evident. The point I'm making is, whoever didn't drop it or rose it, that there's a point that I want to make about these fees, which still seems to me an anomaly. I'm not complaining about the fees. I'm not complaining about the fees, except for this one. I don't understand why permanent residence is at $15,000 for permanent residents, except for the categories of specific workers. Right. And the reason I say this is because, and I think I brought the point to you like this, the top category for work permits under these fees will now go up to $15,000.
Yep.
Let's see. Yeah. So it says here in Scale 1, by the deletion of the words 12,500 immediately appearing under the word fees and the substitution of the word 15,500. Right. So 15,500 will be the top fee for an annual work permit for someone who is like the managing director of a bank. It used to be 12,500. 12,500. Yeah, 15,500 is the annual fee. Permanent residence certificate for a person other than those specified in items 2 to 6 is $15,000. I understand. We raised it to 50. We wanted to raise it to 50. Yeah, no, we did. Made a decision to do so. Election came and rolled back. But I'm saying this is the point, and I'm bringing this to your attention. How could you give work permit cost $15,500, permanent residence to stay here for the rest of your life till you go to the grave for $15,000? That doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. And what I'm saying is, what people come here, where they're renting the Bahamas. That's what they're doing. They go down to Staniel Key, not a care in the world, the most beautiful place you want to see. And we're going to tell them they can live here for the rest of their lives and work in some instances for $15,000. Something's got to be wrong with that.
I think it'll be the economic permanent resident should have a premium.
No question. No question.
I can believe that.
Turning now to some comments made this morning about Bahamas Air. And the Minister for Bahamas Air disturbed a lot of people, Madam President, by this sneering moral high tone that he took about gaming, and in particular web shop gaming, as if, these people were de minimis, the minister responsible for gaming. But he's also responsible for Bahamas Air. And he said that Bahamas Air can't make the principal payments on the loan, $40 million, this year. So the headline, I think, is kicking the can down the road, because he had to ask the Exchequer to deal with it next year because there's no headroom to deal with it this year. And then he said, the favorite one from your side, let's blame the PLP. They should have known better.
This is the second time. You all did it last year.
Let's blame the PLP. They should have known better than to allow Bahamas Air to promise that they could make a principal payment this year. They knew better. But, you know, these are all, Madam President, not a question of political decisions. These are economic decisions. And we know why Bahamas Air exists and what it does, and why it has to continue to exist. You know, Jamaica has mountain roads. We have islands, and we've got to connect them by an airline. And nobody else is going to do what Bahamas Air does. So the subsidy, you look at it just like fixing the road. No, they're not lousy planes. They're not lousy planes. They're not lousy planes. No, they're not lousy planes. All of the Caribbean airlines have these planes, and they work well. Work well. Work well. So that's my point. It's management. Management. That's how the loans for Bahamas Air will be repaid. And I don't gamble, Madam President, but I will venture to say it is not immoral to gamble. It's not immoral to gamble. And even if it is, that's not really my business. You know, we need to get into a neutral zone on this and act in a fair and rational manner. And we think that the taxes now being imposed are not evidence-based and are therefore irrational. It's like someone woke up in the morning and said, look like they're making too much money, so let's go after them. So one wonders if the fellows who got the port at Arawak Key and got that, you know, and nobody else could come within 40 miles, if someone woke up in the morning and said, they're making too much money. They're making too much money, so let's tax them. Let's tax them. Of course not, though. They're in a different category. In a completely different category. And of course, the same thing goes for that company which owns 75% of the market where you have to wash your clothes, you know, washes them, presses them, and so on and so forth. That's a protected business, too. No, I'm fortunate.
That business is not sucking the lifeblood out of the economy.
No, it's not. No. That's your moral position now. Don't bring me that one. And then what I found fascinating, Madam President, was this: when the protest took place in Bay Street, Minister of the Government comes down and tries to calm the troubled waters. But what followed was the interview with the press, which I found fascinating. He says, don't worry about those people. He says, those numbers mean nothing. They are free to demonstrate, but they mean nothing. And then they were dismissed by others as gaming workers who had been threatened with their jobs if they didn't show up on Bay Street, they would get fired. Of course, that was fake news because there's no such memorandum. Someone did a very clever thing online, as they do these days. No, they weren't threatened with their jobs. They weren't threatened with their jobs. And what if they were with the gaming sector? They're entitled to demonstrate and to object to the loss of their jobs. And what I'm saying is, I go back to where I started. Just be very careful. You're just a year out. You're quoting Hoover, tone-deaf Hoover, and now you won't listen to these people screaming on the road telling them because they work in the gaming sector. You know, there's an expression, Madam President, death by 1,000 cuts. Death by 1,000 cuts. And each year, you sit in this bubble called the cabinet. And every time somebody objects to something you don't like, you say, don't worry about them. He says they only represent a small group. And the next year, it's Don't worry about them. I'm not saying 1 year ago, though. 1 year ago, you said you learned your lesson. 1 year ago. 1 year ago. And now you started already. Don't worry about them. Those numbers mean nothing. Those nothings mean nothing. The minister. The minister. Don't worry about them. Don't worry about them. Those numbers mean nothing to me.
Okay, we are getting a bit rowdy in here.
So,
please, other senators.
I just wanted to say, Madam President, we don't accept the underlying logic of this budget, and we don't believe the numbers. We have no faith in the Minister of Finance, who will turn out to be the worst Minister of Finance ever. Now, he's done a wonderful thing, implicitly and explicitly. He's attacked all of his predecessors. They all had it wrong. The predecessors to the present Minister of Finance, they all, well, clever phrase is used, successive governments have borrowed. Successive, and that's why we're in this mess.
Yes.
Successive governments have borrowed. So they all had it wrong. And so, the business community, the gaming community, the people at large, barrels right along, even at the graduation. And then, of course, the Prime Minister is now flying around the country. You know, I heard an ad on ZNS, come see the Prime Minister. He's going to be in Mangrove Key, and he's going to explain to you all about VAT. Now, that should be a riveting discussion. All about VAT. I'm sure. Crowded with people who were not there for the meeting, but for after the meeting, so they could walk up to him and say, Chief, you ain't got 120.
How can you speak so ill?
And even the 4 F&M MPs. But in the face of it, Madam President, in the face of it, the F&M's reply is like that lady who's watching the parade go by, and all the soldiers are in step except her son. And she says, look, everybody's out of step except my Johnny. The only one in step is Peter Turnquest. The only one. Oh boy. You can't help but think that the way this whole budget narrative was designed was to attack the PLP, blame the PLP, the campaign of what we call victor's justice, the tendentious manner of interpreting the stats, even though it's clear that the deficits were coming down and only the hurricanes intervened. And then you go at what's perceived to be the PLP's donor base and try to tax them out of existence. You know, if it weren't so wicked and pernicious, it would be ingenious.
Are you saying that the numbers...
I'm not saying anything. I'm saying what you perceive to be. I have no idea. I don't know. You know, I have no idea. That's big people's business. Big people's business. I saw them getting off someone's jet the other day. So the government, Madam President, is supposed to be responsible for the peace and good order of the country. And social peace sometimes requires debt. Ask many countries. Many countries. You just saw it in Jordan. Just saw it in Jordan. They raise the taxes. If the result is social disorder, you got to back off. You've got to back off. Borrowing is preferable to disorder or riots in the streets. So, Madam President, what we say is, let's concentrate on this, on development, fixing the roads, collecting the garbage, the public buildings. Just within, I mean, this building, I mean, I wish the government leader, well, if you have to travel through to use the restrooms in this place, at least the male restrooms. Disgrace. Do you still have to walk through the dark corridor with no tiles? Look at the roof here, the ceiling. Across the road, across the road. Churchill building, Adderley building, the building down the road there, the building owned by Rodney Bain, the post office building. But what I'm saying is, that's fine, because I think one of the ministers speaking during the debate said, the Prime Minister said how they're going to build this new building for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and it's going to have the passport office, and it's going to have immigration, and so on and so forth, and this is going to be designed, and he's going to have it done because $50 million is being spent on rent, and so on and so forth. But I said, hang on a second, that ain't the same building that came to me when I was minister and approved for these departments to go in, already drawn and designed and all the rest of it. Sounds suspiciously familiar. I don't know where to go. But I'm saying, but that's the direction you ought to be looking at. What can you do? There is nothing that gets money going in this country like construction.
Yes.
Construction. If you want to see a town alive with hope, go to Marsh Harbor on a Friday afternoon when those 1,500 workers come back from Baker's Bay. You've never seen a town so alive. So if you want to get tax revenue up, this is a consumption-based economy. Get consumption going. You don't have to touch the taxes. Get people to spend money. Get people to invest. Start building. And you will be surprised, the major investor and driver of this economy is the Bahamas government. If the Bahamas government sends out a signal, if the Bahamas government, I said so at the start. No, I said so at the start. That's where the line in the sand is drawn. That's the line in the sand is drawn, because I wanted to ask you, despite and I have to declare my friendship with the owner of the property, but I can't understand how you got this property to Xanadu in Freeport. The man will give you excellent terms. All this stuff and time you're talking about Grand Lucayan, you could develop your own thing out of Xanadu. Absolutely, not give it to you, but he will come on excellent terms. You could do it yourself. The government could do it yourself. So maybe there's something. I said to him, maybe there's something we don't know. Maybe there's something we don't know. 200, no, I'm saying, I don't know that story. No, but then what I'm saying is it can be done. It can be done. It can be done. It needs to be done. It needs to be done. It needs to be done. 21 acres, 200 rooms, 75 marina slips, a beach, has the right to have a casino. And you, without having to fool around with these people and all their difficult terms, and so you can start from scratch while you're trying to fix Grand Bahama. And my only point is, that's what you ought to be dealing with. Projects. The airport, the Lyndon Pindling International Airport, is already too small in my view. You should be in phase 2 of it. Expanding it. Just as you've agreed, I see, to continue with North Eleuthera, Exuma, and Bimini. Absolutely. You need to do it. Get people working. That's the point. Get people working. As one of my church members is saying, it's come so much in church. You're talking about statistics and employment. Even in church, he has to run to his car. Otherwise, he could give out $1,500 a church because people need money. They're not doing it because they want to, or it's gratuitous, because they need money to survive. So your statistics, I say again, be careful how you accept those. The reality of what people are suffering in this place. That's the point. And I saw how passionate you were about Grand Bahama. That's why I said you're a compelling spokesman for your side. But do not be hornswoggled by statistics.
Hornswoggled. This is a better man.
Do not be hornswoggled by statistics.
One smuggle. That was just Thompson up there. No one smuggled.
I understand, but the stories are compelling. Individual stories are compelling. That's all I say. That's all I say. Yeah. I think New Providence needs a public transportation system. The people mover that exists in Miami would be a good thing to bring here. The building of a city around Bamsey and Andros, important. And we must fix Grand Bahama. We must fix Grand Bahama. I heard you talk about the airport, but have you been to Marsh Harbor's airport and compared the activity in Marsh Harbor's airport compared to Freeport? I mean, just unbelievable. So those flights, I'm glad they're coming and so on and so forth, but you know, Marsh Harbor, man. I mean, I don't understand how North Eleuthera at New Year's, you cannot find a parking space on the North Eleuthera ramp, anywhere. Can't find it. But Grand Bahama, empty. Empty.
You know why.
Right. And then you're talking about ease of doing business. Yes. Well, you know, we won't call their name, but ease of doing business. You know, this is supposed to be an investor-friendly city, created for that. It is a nightmare, an absolute nightmare. I hope so. We wish so. So my only point, Madam President, is that instead of digging up in the past, yeah.
Bamboo. You taught and you brought. You taught and you worked.
Is that instead of I just told you all, stop concentrating on the past, man. That was 10 minutes ago. That was 10 minutes ago. Yeah, it's 10 to 4 now, you know, not 20 to 4, 10 to 4. 10 to 4, $1,600 coming up fast. So we all have a responsibility, Madam President, to think about the future, even as we concentrate on the past, and come up with a bold vision for the future of this place. We can talk ourselves into depression. We can talk ourselves into depression, or we can act in a manner which carries us forward to raise the heights of this economy. And this is particularly appropriate because we're on the heels of the 45th anniversary of the independence of this country. And those people, as I said, come the 10th of July. What do? Andros is in fact a series of islands. When you go there, you see every island is now bridged. The roads are built, the water's in, the power's in. There's a place in Exuma called the Ferry. There's a bridge there. Before then, you used to have to do that. Yeah. Before Baratari, now part of the mainland. That was done. That may be on your watch. Well, I'm going to tell you the first time I went to Salina Point, it was a 2-hour trip by boat. Me, the Wendell, what was the member of parliament for Wilbert Moss. It rained the whole way, so he was under a canvas over his head, and I sat getting soaking wet. Curtis Hanna, he's a big man. Curtis Hanna was at the wheel, Loftus Roker. That's when I learned the lesson that when the head man said it's time to go, Loftus says to me, we got to leave at 5 o'clock in the morning. And I thought, I'm 22. I said, 5 o'clock? I'm getting up at 5 o'clock. He didn't answer directly to me. He said, loudly enough, all I tell you is, who aren't ready to go at 5 o'clock will get left. So I went. That's how I saw Salina Point for the first time. But all of that, the road has now been put in. I think the road has to be paved, is being paved, or was paved. All of that, Madam President, is work for us to do. We have the fiber cable. Bradley Roberts, when he was the minister, connected all the islands by cable. And I'm raising this point because all of this helped to create the nation. No, I see, unlike those who spoke opposite, who said throughout their presentations, and I think the PLP is saying this, and I think the PLP is saying that, I wouldn't dare speak for you. I can speak for us. But the lasting impression I want to leave is that let us not talk ourselves into depression. Let us instead act to make sure this country grows. If the country grows, then we will have development, we can borrow, we can pay back, and none of these issues will arise. And I say again to the minister, remember, not statistics, but human beings. Remember, not statistics, but human beings. We think about the future. I want to wish everybody a happy Independence Day. We probably won't have another occasion before the 10th of July. I'll join my friends in Georgetown for the independence celebrations there.
Yeah, you always go down there.
Right, since 1998, and I'd like to join them again. And Georgetown, Exuma once, Exuma twice, Exuma 3 times.
What you love Exuma?
I do.
We are grateful.
The Bahamas, it's the Bahamas.
We are grateful.
People always say, what are you doing in Inaugural? What are you doing in Grand Bahama? What are you doing in Marsh Harbor? It's my home, the Bahamas. And we are going to oppose the tax. We're going to oppose the VAT. We're opposing that tax. We will support the government's spending authority, but we separate on this tax. There's no need to tax the Bahamian public. No need to tax the Bahamian public. The existing revenue is sufficient. That, I think, draws out the philosophical lines insofar as I can in this limited time that I have, and I think that makes the difference between us and the FNM. But this is the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, and it belongs to us all. Thank you.
Thank you very